So my first job professionally, like I had worked since I was 8 years old, and I started out babysitting, and then I went to mucking stalls to earn money for my horseback riding lessons because they were $40 an hour, and my mom thought that I needed to know the value of the dollar. So I mucked stalls in South Florida in the summer for 8 hours a day to earn one lesson, right? Okay. Then I go in 1997 and I'm an intern at the NBC affiliate WPTV in West Palm Beach. And I remember walking in, and it's the day Versace was murdered. It's like 8 a.m. in the morning, and the news director looks at me literally as I'm putting my toe across the threshold into the newsroom. And he goes, "Kelly, you're going with Tiffany. Get in the SAT truck. I'm sending you down to Miami to cover the Versace murders." And I was like, what? And I remember we pulled in front of his mansion on Ocean Drive in South Beach. And I'm standing there trying to do a stand-up. And for those of you that don't know, a stand-up, when you watch a newscast, is when you see the reporter on camera, right? You're seeing the video of the story, and then you see the reporter. And it's their bridge to the next part, their video bridge to the next part of the story. And I'm standing there, and I've got CBS corporate there. I've got Telemundo. I've got the national news station of Italy, whatever it was at the time, I don't remember. And all of these camera people are yelling at me and giving me advice. Stand this way, look this way, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, dude, I just want to do this stand up and get the fuck out of here, because it was just nuts. And the energy was very, it was very energizing, but it was very frenetic. Do you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't, grounded energy is very much like this, right? Whereas frenetic energy is like this. It's very erratic. And it was very confusing, and I'm standing like feet from his blood stain, and, and in all of this, you've got the police that are descending on it, and like all this craziness from the media. And that was kind of, when I started to fall in love. I mean, I literally remember something clicking in my brain and me thinking I wanted to be the next Diane Sawyer. And of course, fast forward 22 years later, here I am doing this video series. Now I really believe that, especially nowadays, that storytelling is more important than ever, right? Because it connects us as a human race. It continues that part of oral history, right? So we're keeping this in the forefront. But I also think that I believe that there is so much room for facts, and not the facts that are filtered, but the actual facts, which is why, every episode of this miniseries that we do is backed by data, hard facts from sources like MIT, Harvard, Oxford, all of these reputable sources, and I think that, unfortunately, so many of us across the globe are time impoverished, so we don't have time to dig into the background of what's really going on. So hopefully it's my intention that not only am I telling you anecdotal evidence with stories that will tap into your right brain, but I'll be able to feed the left hemisphere of your brain with these facts and figures. I think I've always been a storyteller. I mean, really, from a young age, and I think it came from, I have to say, my sister Eileen, who I absolutely adore. She's one of the other halves of my heart. She has ADHD and dyslexia, and part of what her tutor said to my mom and dad was, you need to read her books. So that was my thing for her. I used to read to her every night, and it was like our moment to bond. But I think she sucked it up like a sponge. And I think, like any little sister who wants to have time with her big sister, it was those intimate moments that really informed what I'm doing now. I remember, coming home from college, right? And it's I've graduated. I've got my shiny diploma that my parents paid a lot of money for. And I remember my mom, and, sometimes let's not say sometimes, let's drop that. I am a stubborn human, and it has served me in many ways because I don't give up very easily. But also, as my mother would say, and being an Italian American, the word is capatast, and that's like a dialect that my grandmother used to say all the time, like hard head, right? So it takes a lot to get through. And my mother looked at me, I've graduated, right? And she says to me, you have to get a job, any job, I don't care what it is. I don't care what it is. Like, but you can't sit around here. You're not going to sleep in. You're not going to be, like, you're not going to be lazy. We just paid for this to get you educated, right? From Holy Cross, which is an Ivy League caliber school. And I remember going to all of these stores where it was like Petco and all this stuff, and nobody would hire me. Nobody. Until I get a job at Bath and Body Works. And I'm literally standing in front of the store asking people if they want cucumber melon spray. And if you put it in the refrigerator, it was very refreshing. Now, why is this important? Because literally it was the first stepping stone to my career. And I have to tell you, standing out in front of a store in a mall sampling shit, it's kind of humiliating. It really is. But what it has done for me is like, it's kind of taken that humiliation out. I was like, okay, I've done that. But that led to an associate producer position at WPBF, which is the ABC affiliate in West Palm Beach, Florida. I learned how to do that. Like I told you before, I had worked at WPTV, the NBC affiliate, during the Versace murders. So I got to see how important storytelling and conveying information and accurate information was, not only to inform people, but to, keep them safe, because at the time they hadn't caught Andrew Cunanan yet. He was running around, and he was a serial killer, right? So you're living in South Florida, a famous person has been murdered, and his murderer is on the run. So that is when media is really critical. You know what I mean? Now, fast forward, right? I end up getting fired from my ABC affiliate, and I get a job at the PBS NPR affiliate for this gentleman named Lee Rowand, who literally was my best boss. And now it's come full circle because he and I are colleagues and friends, and I wrote him a letter of recommendation. But I remember I was so humiliated because I had never been fired before, right? I was the good girl. Like, I was the nice girl, I did everything I was supposed to do. So when I got fired, I was like, oh my God, this is the worst. I'm worthless. Like, I'm never going to work again. When he met me and he hired me, the first thing he said to me on my very first day of work was, you're no one until you're fired in television. He's like, so you're ahead of the game. So let's put that behind us. And that was my first lesson in learning what the lessons and blessings are, right? The next thing that really and a lot of lessons stayed with me from him and still do and inform my work today. But he also said to me, he said, you're not going to be here long. And honestly, as a 22-year-old, I was like, what do you mean? I've already had 4 jobs in the span of less than a year. All I wanted to do was find my home. And when he said, you're not going to be here long, I was like, what the fuck? I want the freaking gold watch. I want to stay there forever. But he said to me, you're going to parlay this into something better. And I did. I got hired by Clear Channel as a promotions assistant. 6 months later, one of the promotions directors was fired, and I moved into that position where I was marketing and promoting 6 radio stations in a cluster. And I did that for 4.5 years. And I will tell you, it really helped me understand, number one, how to market so that people listen, what people respond to, and human behavior. So not only the demographics, but the psychographics that drive buying behaviors, right? So that was great. Then I ended up getting hired by Ballet Florida, because I had done a promotion for them where I tripled their ticket sales, and that had never happened for them before. They ended up hiring me as a marketing director. And I'll tell you, the negotiation went like this. okay, I'll come work for you, but I want a title change. I want my own office and I want $25,000 more. And they gave it to me. So, that taught me how to negotiate and how to ask for what I want, which has helped me with my clients because, a lot of times we go in with this fear like, oh, if I tell my boss this is really what I want, that I'm going to get fired or I'm going to get retaliated against. And it didn't happen. Um, then I ended up getting relocated to a company in Virginia. And again, they had followed my career in the media, which I didn't know. They needed a community relations manager to manage 60 type A women in a sales position, which type A women, like, and then 60 of them, and I'm a 20 something managing 60, you know what I mean? It was insane. But that 1 year was baptism by fire on how to manage people, and how to manage difficult personalities, which, okay, then I went back to radio sales, and that time was really about learning what my moral compass was and distinguishing between a bad business decision and eroding my integrity. Okay, I'm not going to get into the details of what happened, but I will tell you that the managers in that radio group in Norfolk were less than ethical. And I realized that I can maneuver around a bad business decision, but I'm not willing to compromise my integrity, which is why I ended up leaving. Now, fast forward to January 20th, 2009, after I've worked my ass off and made a ton of money for a company that wasn't making money in 2008. Nobody was spending money on advertising, right? But I helped them recover like $1.8 million in almost lost revenue and almost $700,000 in new local revenue during 2008 when the economy was tanking. Okay. So now I've learned how to take the buying information and what motivates people to buy in a difficult economic time. I learned how to fight for our market share, but also I learned how to be fired gracefully. I walked in, I remember it was 8 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. And the only reason I remember this is because I canvassed for Obama. It was the first time I ever knocked on doors. And January 20th, 2009 was the day he was inaugurated. And from a strategic perspective, right, Clear Channel, master of distraction, had everybody looking, the press was looking and covering this historic inauguration that had never happened before in our country. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Clear Channel is cutting 30,000 jobs. And the way it was handled, and I will tell you, this informs how I advise my clients when they're letting people go, because I had such an inhumane way of firing me. I walked in to my boss's office. Well, I walked in, I sat down in my chair. I get a tap on my shoulder at 9 o'clock, so an hour later, and the guy who was replacing me, which I didn't know at the time, says to me, "Terry wants to see you in his office." And I was like, oh, fuck. Because I had heard rumors, and then it showed up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal like a couple weeks before that Clear Channel was cutting these jobs. So I walk in, and I sit down, and the marketing director is sitting next to me and laughing and smirking at the time. And he hands me a manila envelope with my name on it. And he says, "You have 10 days to review this with your attorney and sign it." And I was shocked, honestly. It felt like somebody had knocked the wind out of me. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "We put your numbers through a corporate budget matrix and you didn't make the cut." So here are two things. Number one, everybody I've talked to in corporate doesn't know what a fucking corporate budget matrix is. It's nothing. Like somebody made it up, kind of like the word priorities. It's a made up word. There's no such thing. There's priority, not priorities. Okay. So I said, "That's bullshit, and you know it." It's the first time I've ever sworn at a boss. Ever. I'm not one of those people that bucks authority until now. And he looked at me directly and said, "You have 10 days to review this with your attorney and sign it." And I got up Outside his office was HR and the guy who was replacing me. They walked me to my cubicle and said, "We'll pack up your office and send you whatever, is in your cubicle." And fortunately, I have a very strong intuition. And weeks before, I had consulted with a labor attorney just to know what my rights were. I'd never done that before in my life, but I did it. I turned around, I looked at them, and I quoted the Commonwealth of Virginia labor laws. And I was like, according to statute, blah, 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 of the Commonwealth of Virginia, I have as much time as I want to pack up my belongings, and whatever is left, you can send to my home. And literally, the HR director went like this. And I was like, I try to inform myself as much as possible, right? And I encourage you all to do the same thing. Um, and I remember my wedding picture and my external hard drive. And I went to walk out of the cubicle, and the HR director looked at me and said, "Don't forget to take the laptop." And I stopped, looked at her, and I said, "The laptop does not belong to me. It belongs to the company, and I don't take things that don't belong to me." And they literally escorted me out. Now, luckily, I had the time to fax my attorney the severance agreement before I left, and I got on the phone with him, told him the story, and he said to me, "Thank God you didn't take the laptop. It would have nullified your severance agreement." So at that moment, I knew, because I was so sick and I didn't realize how sick I was. Like, I would throw up every morning before work, and I had perpetual diarrhea, always. And I didn't know why. I wasn't sleeping well. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I would drink a venti red eye from Starbucks, which, if you don't know what that is, it's a coffee with like 5 shots of espresso in it. And I would still be exhausted. Okay. So all of those are signs of burnout. But I didn't know because I was so in it. I get in my car, I go home, and I grieve it for 7 days. I mean, when I tell you 7 days, I was face down on the couch, crying. I don't think I showered. I didn't get off the couch except to feed our dogs and let them out. And then I remember this moment in time. I'll never forget it. Our golden retriever, Murphy, came and put her head on my lap. And she looked at me and was like, "Mom, you need to get your shit together." And I know I'm humanizing her. I know she was a dog. I know she didn't do this. But she looked right at me and into me and was like, "You're better than this. Pick yourself up. Let's go." And from that moment, I got in the shower, and I remember I'm washing my hair for the first time, like in 7 days. And the thought came, you need to do something more life affirming with your life. And I remember after I got out of the shower, I got my first call from my husband, who was stationed in Guantanamo Bay during this whole thing, working with the 9/11 detainees. And he said to me, "Are you done?" And I said, "Done what?" And he goes, "Done working for stupid bosses." And I was like, "Oh, sure." He's like, "I think you should start your own thing." I was like, "Oh, sure. Just start my own business." In 2009, in the worst economic downturn at the time, you want me to start my own business? Are you crazy? So I Googled how to start your own business in Virginia. And believe it or not, thank God for Senator Mark Warner. He had made Virginia number 8 in the country for starting businesses. So it literally was get your business license, register with the state, and go. And I had $75 in my bank account. And anytime I tell this story when I'm paid to speak, I always say to people, don't do it this way. Okay. I really believe that I have angels and the universe looking out for me, because $35 went to gas up my car and $40 went to my business license. But what that forced me to do was be really resourceful. So about 4 months into this, and thank God I had the severance agreement and unemployment, I was in the black, and I've been in the black ever since. And I hired a business coach. I'll never forget it. I got on the phone with her for I had a 90-minute call, discovery call that she gifted to me. And I'm telling her the story about Clear Channel and what had happened to me. I mean, I even went to the point where I sent her 25 pages of documentation of everything that they had done to me. And she's listening quietly. And about 45 minutes into the call, she says to me, "Are you open to some coaching around this?" And I was like, "Well, duh, I'm on this call, right?" And she goes, "I think you're a victim and I think you need to take ownership of your life." And this is what I said to her: "Fuck off, Charisse." And I hung up the phone. And then I sat back at my desk and I thought, two questions floated into my mind. One, is she right? And two, is there any truth to what she's saying? Both answers came back yes. So I looked at my watch and I realized I had about 40 minutes left in this free call. And I called her back and apologized. And we ended up working together for 3.5 years. And I credit her for pushing me to be a coach because I had never considered it. Never. Because my context of coaches was the law of attraction. And in my mind, I had this idea of hippie chicks barefoot, skipping through fields, tossing petals into the air, and talking about how life was so great. And Charisse snapped me right back into reality and said, "What if you could change the corporate conversation just based on how you showed up?" And I was like, that interests me, because I had seen firsthand how corporate America is hypocritical, isn't in integrity, treats its people badly, because I was one of them. You know what I mean? And that was 2010. I got my coaching certificate from Chicago, from this place called Sapien Harbor Coaching Academy, did 175 hours in human and organizational transformation. And here we are. And I've been helping to facilitate and assist humans and the organizations to be the best versions of themselves. And now, this project is a passion project because I know there are people out there that are struggling to find their place in this discussion of racism and dismantling it in our country. And I'm just hoping that people will listen to some of the stories and some of the awarenesses I'm having, and hopefully rethink things, open their minds, look at things differently, question everything. Everything. I mean, literally everything, from why we use forks to why, a quote and a ruling from Chief Justice Taney from 1857 is still alive and kicking in our country. The problem is, us as a white culture have not taken the time to look at it because we've been distracted, deflected, defensive, just add all of it. So if you're uncomfortable, that's great, because that means you're growing, and that's pretty much the story. So